After surviving cancer, I came home early from a checkup to find my wife laughing on the phone saying, "He's too weak to notice anything anyway." I found hidden credit cards, hotel receipts, and a second phone filled with texts. When I finally confronted her, she rolled her eyes and said, "You were supposed to die, not make this complicated." I walked away that day with nothing, but she didn't know I'd already taken everything that mattered. I was standing in my own hallway, still wearing the wristband from the oncology center, when I heard my wife's voice drifting out of the kitchen. I hadn't meant to come home early. My checkup finished faster than expected, and for once, the results were good enough that I felt light, almost hopeful. I remember thinking I'd surprise her. Maybe we'd get lunch. Maybe we'd finally feel normal again after the hell of the last year. Instead, I froze when I heard her laugh. Not her regular laugh. This one was sharp, careless. Then she said it, clear as day, like she'd been waiting to say it out loud. "He's too weak to notice anything anyway." I thought I was mishearing. My hearing's been weird since chemo, so I held my breath and leaned closer. My heart was slamming so hard I thought I'd black out. She kept talking, still laughing, her voice low but not nearly low enough. "No, seriously," she said. "I could tell him I spent the night at a church lock-in, and he'd believe it. He doesn't question anything. He's exhausted all the time. Honestly, this is the easiest it's ever been." My stomach dropped so hard I had to put a hand on the wall. My wife, my caretaker, my supposed partner, was talking about me like I was an obstacle, a burden, a fool. And the worst part of me knew exactly what this meant, because that wasn't the first time I had felt something was off. But I'd dismissed it every time. I told myself it was chemo brain, paranoia, trauma, fear. I told myself she was overwhelmed and tired. I told myself a lot of stupid things. But hearing her say those words you can't misinterpret, it snapped something in me. I stepped back quietly and went to our bedroom. I wasn't thinking clearly, just following this sick feeling in my chest. That's when I saw it, her purse open on the dresser. A wallet thicker than I'd ever seen it. Cards I didn't recognize. A hotel room key tucked between receipts. The address printed in bold letters like it wanted to taunt me. Then I checked the nightstand. The second phone was right there. No password. She must have thought I'd never go through her stuff. And honestly, until that moment, she was right. I opened the phone and the screen lit up with messages I'll never forget. Dozens of them. Some from the man she'd been laughing with. Some from another number. Pictures. Plans. Comments about me. About my illness. About how lucky they were that I was too sick to care. Every message felt like another punch. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop scrolling. The timeline went back months, maybe longer, and then I hit one text that made my vision tunnel so hard I had to sit on the bed. "Once his life insurance gets paid out, we won't have to sneak around anymore." I didn't remember standing up. I didn't remember walking back toward the kitchen. All I know is that by the time she saw me, her face didn't even drop. She didn't panic. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She just rolled her eyes and said, like I was annoying her, "You were supposed to die, not make this complicated." That was the moment something inside me went ice cold. I walked out of the house with nothing but my keys. What she didn't know was that I'd already taken everything that actually mattered. Everything. But that part of the story, that's where things really begin. I met Claire in Phoenix in 2015. I was 29, working as a home inspector, sweating through every shirt I owned, and convinced that staying busy meant I was doing okay in life. She was the opposite, calm, polished, always put together. She worked HR at a healthcare company, and she talked like someone who had already figured out the manual for adulthood. I fell stupidly fast. She felt like safety, and back then, safety was all I wanted. My dad had just died from a sudden heart attack, and my mom had moved to Tennessee to live with my sister. I was alone in a city that didn't care if you vanished. Then Claire showed up and made me feel like someone finally saw me. We moved in together after a year. She liked things done her way. Clean counters, clear schedules, plans made weeks ahead. I adjusted because I thought that's what real couples did. And for a while, we actually seemed happy. We got married in Sedona. Small ceremony, red rocks behind us like something out of a postcard. I remember looking at her that day and thinking, if this is it, I'm lucky. When I got diagnosed 3 years later, she reacted exactly how I thought a loving partner would. She cried. She held me. She made color-coded binders of treatment plans. She took notes at every appointment. She talked to nurses like she worked there. Everyone told me I was lucky to have her. But looking back, there were cracks I tried not to see. The way she'd sigh loudly when I asked for help rearranging pillows because my spine hurt. The way she'd get short with me if I woke her up in the night because I couldn't stop shaking. The way she'd go out with coworkers. Almost every weekend once I started losing my hair. I assumed she was coping. I told myself she was stressed. I blamed myself for needing too much. I was fighting for my life, but part of me was also terrified of losing her. Money started getting weird too. She took over the bills to reduce my stress. Every time I offered to help, she'd snap, "Do you want me to do this or not?" I let it go. She said my only job was to survive. Then the credit card calls started. She said it was fraud, that she'd handle it. I didn't push. I didn't think I had the right to when she was carrying everything. When I went into remission, she wasn't relieved. Not really. She was stiff, impatient. She kept saying, "We still have to be careful." Like she was annoyed my survival was inconvenient. The real shift happened about 6 months before the day I caught her on the phone. She got more distant, more angry, more trapped. I'd ask simple questions. "Do you want dinner together?" And she'd act like I was interrogating her. But the weirdest part? Whenever I brought up the future, she'd say, "Let's just take things one day at a time." At the time, I thought she was scared of relapse. Now I know she was terrified her timeline was falling apart. And while she was pulling away from me, I started doing something I never told her about. Something quiet. Something small. Something she didn't even know I was capable of. Something that would end up being the only reason I didn't walk away empty-handed. The thing I never told Claire, what she never imagined I'd do, started the day I realized I might actually survive. It was about 8 months before everything blew up. I'd had a chemo session that didn't completely level me, and I remember sitting on the couch afterward, scrolling through my phone, thinking about how fragile everything suddenly felt. Cancer forces you to admit how little control you have. But it also sharpens you in ways people don't understand. I'd been blindly trusting for years, and for the first time, something in me whispered, "Stop acting like your life is on autopilot." So I opened a notes app and created a private folder. My goal wasn't revenge. It wasn't paranoia. It was simple survival. I started tracking every bill, every account, every password. I checked my credit report. I checked hers. I checked mail before she got home. I made copies of documents I hadn't looked at in years. I saved screenshots, statements, emails, little things that made me feel grounded. I didn't know what I was preparing for. I just knew I needed to. Back then, I hadn't suspected an affair. I didn't think she was capable of something that cruel. What I did start noticing, though, was how often she left the house. The gym. HR networking dinners. Grocery store runs that took 2 hours when all we needed was milk. The first real red flag came one night when she came home smelling like a cologne I didn't recognize. Not strong. Almost like she'd rushed to shower but missed a spot behind her ear. When I asked about it, she laughed and said I was delirious from meds. I let it go, but something in my chest twisted. Then came the Uber charges. Then the weekends she said she was staying with a friend because she needed a mental break from caregiving. Then came the hotel charge on a credit card I didn't know existed. When I asked her about it, she snapped so fast it scared me. "Do you think I'm the one being shady? After everything I do for you?" She turned it around on me so effectively I ended up apologizing. I remember standing in our kitchen, swallowing guilt that didn't belong to me. She hugged me, but it felt stiff, like a performance for an invisible audience. And the escalation didn't stop. She kept losing patience with me. She'd roll her eyes when I walked slowly. She'd sigh when I asked for help. She'd get irritated when I tried to cook or do chores, telling me I'd just make more work. I was starting to feel like a guest in my own life. The night before the checkup where I caught her, she was especially off. She stayed out late, came home smiling to herself, and didn't even bother explaining where she'd been. When I asked if she wanted to come with me to the appointment in the morning, she said she had things to do. I remember lying awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking something wasn't right. But I didn't know how bad it really was. What I did know, what I'd come to realize slowly, was that Claire didn't look at me the same anymore. Not with love. Not even with pity. She looked at me like a loose end. And the more I paid attention, the more I saw it. The way she studied me when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was calculating something. But none of it prepared me for the truth I was going to find when I walked into the house early that day. When I walked into that kitchen and heard her laughing on the phone, I thought the betrayal was the affair. I thought the hotel receipts and the hidden credit cards and the second phone were the big reveal. But that wasn't the real hit. The real hit came about 10 minutes after she rolled her eyes at me and said, "You were supposed to die. Not make this complicated." Because after she said that, she didn't look scared. She didn't look guilty. She wasn't scrambling for an excuse. She wasn't panicked I'd found the phone or the cards or the texts. She looked annoyed. Annoyed that I was standing there at all. Annoyed that I'd survived. Annoyed that her life didn't unfold the way she'd planned. And then she said something I still hear at night. "You think I haven't known you've been snooping? You think I didn't see you checking mail? Checking accounts? You're predictable. You've always been predictable." That stopped me cold. Because I thought I'd been careful. I thought the private folder and the document copies and the email alerts I set up were invisible. But apparently, she had known for months that I was starting to pay attention. And she hadn't cared. Not because she trusted me, but because she thought time was on her side. Because she thought my body would give out before I put the pieces together. She wasn't careless. She was confident. And the only reason she was confident became clear when she finally spat out the truth. "You weren't supposed to survive the first round. They said the odds were low. We structured everything around that. Now you want to ruin it because you can't just accept reality?" We. That word. She didn't say I. She said we. That was the moment my stomach flipped over itself so hard I almost threw up. I asked her who we was. She didn't answer. She just smiled. Not a kind smile. Not even a mean one. A satisfied smile. The kind of smile someone gives when the trapdoor opens exactly the way they built it. And like an idiot I pressed again. "Who is we, Claire?" She shrugged. "People who actually care about my future." Then she walked right past me, brushing her shoulder against mine like I was in her way in a grocery aisle. She grabbed her purse, the phone, the receipts, all of it, and stuffed them in without even trying to hide anything anymore. She wasn't worried I'd expose her. She wasn't worried I'd react. She wasn't worried I'd fight. She was certain I was too weak, physically, financially, legally, to do anything. Because for months, while I was fighting cancer, she'd been fighting for something else entirely. Then she threw out the final grenade before heading toward the door. "You think the affair is the betrayal? You think that's what this is about? God. You have no idea what was going on behind your back. Behind my back. Not between her and another man. Behind my back." In that moment, the entire past year reassembled itself into something darker. Something bigger than cheating, bigger than lies. The second phone. The hotel stays. The credit cards. The irritation when I showed signs of recovering. Her controlling the finances. Her mental breaks. The cologne. Her comments about timelines. Her sudden obsession with life insurance paperwork. She hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been planning something with someone else. Something that required me gone. Something she was angry I had survived long enough to interrupt. And it wasn't until 3 nights later, after I'd left the house, after I'd slept in my truck, after I'd gone back for one final piece of information, that I finally discovered who we actually was, and why they wanted me out of the picture. The night everything snapped, I didn't go to a hotel or call a friend. I drove to a quiet cul-de-sac near South Mountain and parked under a dead streetlight. I slept sitting up with the seat reclined, the desert air seeping into my bones. My mind felt like it was firing on 2 tracks at once. Shock on one side, calculation on the other. I kept replaying her words. We structured everything around that. People who care about my future. You were supposed to die. She hadn't been talking about an affair partner. She'd been talking about a plan. Something coordinated. Something bigger. And I realized, if she'd been confident enough to say all that to my face, she must have believed she'd already won. She must have believed she'd covered every track. She must have believed I had no power left. Not financially, not emotionally, not physically. But she had no idea I'd been preparing for months. Quietly, patiently, and more importantly, completely. The next morning, I drove to our house when I knew she'd be at work. I still had a key. She'd always assumed I'd never use it without telling her. Another mistake on her part. I went straight to the office closet, where she kept a fireproof box she thought I didn't know the combination to. But I did. I'd memorized it months earlier when she opened it in front of me without realizing the angle of the mirror across the room. Inside the box were exactly what I expected. Our life insurance policy, her separate policy, I didn't know existed, tax documents, a file folder labeled future, and the one thing I came for. The binder she always kept locked away, her HR meeting binder. Except it wasn't HR meetings. It was a full, detailed breakdown of our finances, her projected assets, and timelines that correlated almost perfectly with my treatment cycles. Notes in margins. Numbers. Deadlines. A disturbing level of planning for a future where I wasn't alive. But the real punch came when I flipped the binder to the back pocket. That's where I found the second twist beginning to reveal itself. A contract signed. Not by her. Not by me. By someone else. Someone I recognized. Her sister, Amanda. That was the moment everything clicked. Her we. Her confidence. Her timeline. It wasn't an affair partner working with her. It was her own family. And the plan wasn't about love or lust or running off with another man. It was about money, assets, and everything I'd worked for before I got sick. But I'll get to that in the next part. Right then, standing in our house with the binder open, something inside me hardened. I wasn't the weak man she pictured. I wasn't the dying husband she could manipulate. And I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything I'd ever built. So I started planning my retaliation. I photographed every document, front, back, signatures, dates. I scanned everything into a cloud account she didn't know existed. I copied the contract, the timelines, the handwritten notes. Then I went a step further. I pulled out the second burner phone, the one she didn't know I'd found weeks earlier hidden inside a cereal box in the garage, the one with messages that tied everything together. I synced it to my drive. Next, I logged into the financial accounts she thought I couldn't access. The ones she'd paid from. The ones she'd used for hotel stays. The ones she thought she'd hidden by switching paper statements to digital only. I downloaded everything. I moved slowly, calmly, methodically. Every document, every screenshot, every message, every receipt. By the time I left the house, my truck smelled like dust and adrenaline. My hands were steady. Too steady. Because the truth is, vengeance doesn't start with rage. It starts with clarity. And I finally had clarity. I knew who we was. I knew what they wanted. And I knew exactly how to burn the entire plan down without them even realizing the match was lit. And the real twist, the one that would dismantle everything they'd built, was something they never saw coming because it was something I had done a long time ago. Without telling a soul. I didn't go after Claire right away. I didn't confront her sister. I didn't call lawyers or family or friends. I did something else. Something she never could have predicted because she'd spent years believing I was passive, obedient, and too trusting to ever think for myself. I drove to Mesa, to a storage unit facility off the highway, the same one I'd been quietly paying for since before my diagnosis. Claire didn't know about it. Nobody did. I signed the rental agreement on my lunch break years earlier and never mentioned it to her because she'd always micromanaged our space at home. Inside the unit were the items I'd stored before I ever got sick. Things Claire told me to get rid of because they were clutter. I kept them anyway. Old work files, sentimental things, and boxes of documents from the business I'd sold before moving in with her. She thought that sale had wiped out any assets I had. She thought I'd walked into the marriage with nothing. She never questioned it because I never talked about money unless she brought it up. But the truth was the opposite. The sale hadn't cleaned me out. It had made me money. A lot of it. Enough that I'd put a portion into investments under an LLC she didn't know existed. Enough that the money had quietly doubled during the years she thought I was broke. Enough that, 3 months before my diagnosis, I had taken everything out of the market and moved it to a place she would never think to look. A trust. With my mother as backup trustee. Filed in Tennessee under my birth name, the one I stopped using after moving to Arizona. Claire didn't know any of this. And the reason she didn't know was simple. In our marriage, she never once considered that I had a life before her that mattered. But the money, that wasn't the real twist. The real twist was what I found taped to the inside of one of the storage boxes. A thin stack of envelopes I'd forgotten about. Letters. From my business partner. From old clients. From my father. Stuff I'd shoved away years earlier. And tucked in the back was a white envelope with a title I hadn't looked at since the day I signed it. Living Will and Financial Directives. It hit me so hard I had to sit down on the cold concrete. Because inside that envelope, signed, witnessed, filed legally, were 2 things that would shatter Claire's entire plan. Claire was not listed as my primary beneficiary. I had never updated it after marriage. She assumed she was automatically the one who'd receive everything if I died. She never once asked. She didn't think she needed to. My mother was still listed as the sole beneficiary of my life insurance policy. The one she thought she'd cash in on. And the kicker? Claire had increased the policy amount behind my back, thinking she'd get a bigger payout. All she had done was increase the money my mom would receive. I laughed. An ugly, broken laugh that echoed through the metal walls, because the truth hit me like a freight train. Claire's entire timeline, every part of her. We structured everything around that plan, every hotel meeting, every document she forged, every conversation she had with her sister. It was all built on a foundation that didn't exist. She was planning a future with money that wasn't hers. She was counting on a payout she would never legally get. She spent months treating me like a walking payday, never realizing the payday was going to someone she'd never even met. And she had no clue. Not yet. But I wasn't done. Because I still didn't know why she'd done it. I didn't know the real reason. The cold, calculating, horrifying reason she wanted me gone. But I would. And that truth would hit harder than anything that came before it. I didn't learn the real reason until a week after I left the house. By then, I'd been sleeping in my truck, living on gas station food, and showering at a gym where nobody asked questions. I felt like a ghost hovering outside my old life. But I wasn't ready to move yet. Not until I understood why she had been willing to treat me like a dead man on a countdown. The answer came from someone I never expected. Amanda. Her sister. She texted me, "We need to talk." Along with a location. Some half-empty bar off Bell Road. I almost didn't go, but something in me wanted the last puzzle piece. I wanted to hear the truth from one of the people who had been planning my exit. When I walked in, Amanda looked nothing like the smug person I'd seen in the binder photos. Her hands shook around her drink. Her eyes were red. She looked wrecked. She didn't even let me sit before blurting out. She lied to me too. I didn't believe her at first. Why would I? But then she told me everything, slowly, like someone peeling their skin back. Here's the truth that hit me. Claire didn't just want me gone for money. She didn't just want the life insurance. She didn't just want a future without being tied down to a dying man. As she phrased it in one of those texts, the real reason was so much colder. 2 years earlier, right around the time of my diagnosis, Claire had applied for a promotion at her company, a job that would have doubled her salary and opened the door to a corporate relocation program. It was her dream job, the one she'd been grinding for since college. But the company had a policy. No major dependents requiring long-term care. Not for that role. Not for relocation. Not for international assignments. Having a spouse in active cancer treatment automatically disqualified her. It didn't matter how qualified she was. It didn't matter how hard she worked. Having me meant she got stamped NO across the application. She hadn't told me because she didn't want to look resentful. She hadn't told me because it would make her the bad guy. She hadn't told me because she believed, truly believed, that I would be dead soon anyway and the problem would solve itself. But when I didn't die, when I survived the first round, then the second, Then the third, she panicked. Her career was stalled. She was stuck in the same position, making the same money. She couldn't travel. She couldn't relocate. She couldn't build the life she deserved. In her words, Amanda told me everything. How Claire had come to her crying, saying she was trapped. How she'd convinced her family that my survival was ruining her life plans. How they sat around discussing my treatment updates like they were watching a clock that wouldn't hit zero. Then came the final punch. She said she didn't hate you, Amanda whispered. She just needed you out of the picture. She said she couldn't waste her life waiting for someone who couldn't keep up. That line hit harder than the rest. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. Brutally honest. The kind of truth that shows someone's soul without them meaning to. Claire didn't see me as a person she loved. She saw me as a barrier. A stalled opportunity. A delay in her career timeline. I wasn't her husband. I was an inconvenience. Hearing it stripped the last piece of grief out of me and replaced it with something clearer. Purpose. Because once you understand the villain's motive, you understand exactly where to strike. And I knew where to strike. Once I knew the truth, her real reason, the cold logic behind all of it. I stopped feeling like a broken man crawling out of something tragic. I felt focused, clean, like everything inside me finally lined up the way it should have from the start. Claire wanted me gone because I was slowing down her future. She wanted a promotion more than a marriage. She wanted my death to check a box on a corporate application. Fine. If she wanted her future so badly, I was going to hand it to her. Just not the version she expected. The first step of my revenge had already happened without me lifting a finger. She'd built her entire plan on the assumption she'd receive my life insurance. All I had to do was nothing. My mother remained the sole beneficiary. Claire never saw a dime. Then I set the rest into motion. I started with her job, her dream promotion, the one she'd been chasing for years. I sent an anonymous packet to the corporate compliance division. Inside was everything. The hotel receipts, the second phone screenshots, the hidden credit cards, the binder, the timeline she'd made about my expected decline, and the contract she'd made with her sister. I included her own words. He was supposed to die, not make this complicated. Healthcare companies don't play around with ethics violations, especially when they involve financial manipulation of a vulnerable spouse. The next week, I heard from someone who still worked with her. Claire wasn't just denied the promotion. She was fired. Step 2 was the finances she thought she controlled. Because while she believed she drained our accounts behind my back, she never realized the main account she used was a secondary one. The real money, the trust, the LLC, the investments were all untouched. When she emptied what she thought was everything, all she did was expose her own theft to the bank. I reported the unauthorized transfers and the forged digital signatures. Since everything was documented in the folder she didn't know existed, the bank launched a fraud investigation. Her accounts were frozen within days. Step 3 was the house. She assumed I'd walk away from it because my name wasn't on the primary mortgage. Another mistake. The down payment had come from my premarital assets. Once I filed a claim showing proof of contribution and the financial abuse during my illness, the court granted an emergency order blocking her from selling or transferring anything. She woke up one morning to discover she wasn't allowed to set foot inside without violating a court directive. But the final stroke, the one that broke her, came quietly. I met with her sister again. And this time I didn't come angry. I came calm. I showed her the documents, the trust, the will, the fact that Claire had dragged her into something that was never going to work. Amanda cracked fast. She agreed to sign a sworn affidavit detailing Claire's intentions, manipulation, and statements about waiting for me to die. With that single affidavit, everything collapsed for Claire. Legally, financially, socially. What she tried to build on my death ended up burying her instead. I didn't gloat. I didn't call her. I didn't show up to see the fallout. I just watched from a distance as she spiraled. Job gone, bank accounts frozen, family turning on her, and the future she'd sacrificed everything for slipping straight through her fingers. I rebuilt my life slowly. I got a small apartment in Tempe. I joined a cancer survivor hiking group. I reconnected with the parts of myself she'd tried to shrink. And when the dust finally settled, I sent her one thing. A single envelope. Inside was a photocopy of my original living will with one sentence highlighted. Primary beneficiary, mother. No note. No explanation. No anger. Just truth. She wanted me to die so she could collect a future. Instead, I lived and she lost hers. And honestly, surviving was the pettiest revenge I ever pulled.